Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with a big news on page number 11 of the Delhi edition of The Hindu. But I don't understand, why is this news item on page number 11? It should ideally have been on page number 1. It is such a big news. But I do predict going forward, this issue is going to dominate the front pages of our newspapers as well as dominate the television screens. What is the controversy? Ministry of Home Affairs has issued an order. This order has authorized 10 central agencies. What these agencies can do? They can intercept, monitor, and decrypt any information generated, transmitted, received, or even stored in any computer. And because of this order, India has been virtually turned into a police state. All computers now are under government watch. But is government justified to issue such an order or authorized to issue such an order? Yes. Under the Information Technology Act of 2000, the central government can direct any agency to do all these things. But such an order should have been issued against a terrorist organization or the members of a terrorist organization, or against those individuals about whom we fear that they might break the law, they might violate law and order, they might break public order. But you can't virtually place the entire population of this country under surveillance. So this order is basically unconstitutional. This order violates the telephone tapping guidelines. This order violates the privacy judgment of the Supreme Court. This order also violates the Aadhaar judgment of the Honorable Court. But let me raise another important issue. Such an order should have been ideally debated on the floor of the Parliament today. But what is happening? Parliament is not functioning. Parliamentarians are creating ruckus on the floor of the Parliament. There is pandemonium on the floor of the Parliament. We elect our representatives so that these representatives can voice our concerns and grievances on the floor of the Parliament. Inside the temple of India's democracy, this Parliament, our issues of public importance should have been debated and dissected. But what is happening? Parliament is not functioning. And even though Parliament is not functioning ideally, we still see important bills are getting passed without any debate, without any discussion. Dr. Shashi Tharoor tried to introduce important amendments to the transgender bill, but because of the ruckus, because of the noise, he could not do that, and transgenders bill was passed. And we have apprehensions that important bills will be passed by the Parliament without any serious debate, without any serious discussion. And such an important bill as DNA profiling bill may well be passed by the Parliament without any debate, without any discussion. Because something serious happened in 2008 as well. In 2008, Section 66A was added to this Information Technology Act of 2000. And because of this Section 66A, if you post any comment using your computer device, using your electronic device, and if this comment causes annoyance to the people, you could be arrested and put behind bars. This amendment, Section 66A to IT Act, it criminalized freedom of speech and expression in this country. And under this Section 66A, number of innocent individuals were arrested and put behind bars. It was only in the year 2015 that we saw Supreme Court said Section 66A violates freedom of speech and expression and as such is unconstitutional. But do you know what? This Section 66A was added to the Information Technology Act of the year 2000 without any debate, without any discussion on the floor of the Parliament. And that is the concern now. Important pieces of legislations can be passed by the Parliament without any discussion, without any debate. And that speaks volumes about the sorry state of our parliamentary business. That is one thing that we need to understand from this newspaper article. Let's look at another news on page number 1. Centre seeks 41,000 crore more to recapitalize banks. It's a very important news and will be discussed in detail in our Economy This Week lectures. But to tell you, if this 41,000 crore is made available to the government, it will help those public sector banks which were placed under PCA, prompt corrective action. And a bank which was placed under prompt corrective action, their lending capability was severely restricted. If this money is made available to the government will recapitalize, inject more money into these public sector banks, and these public sector banks can then come out of PCA and they will then be in a position to lend credit to those who need them. That is one thing that you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let us talk about a news item on page number 5. The discovery of antibiotic was considered to be the most important discovery which saved the lives of the millions of the people on this planet. But there are concerns that increasingly people are becoming antibiotic resistant. World Health Organization is already talking about a post-antibiotic world. A study was conducted recently in Chennai, and this study took samples of various raw food, and this raw food tested positive for colistin resistant bacteria. That means if you eat this raw food and if you were to develop an infection, this infection cannot be treated with even a powerful antibiotic such as colistin, because this raw food contains bacteria which is resistant even to a powerful antibiotic called colistin. Now let's talk about something else. Superbugs. What are these superbugs? Superbugs are also called multi-resistant. That means it's a bacteria that carries several resistance genes. These are resistant to multiple antibiotics, and these are able to survive even after they are exposed to one or more antibiotics. Today, infections such as TB, pneumonia, it's becoming increasingly harder to treat these infections with typical antibiotics because now people are becoming more and more resistant to antibiotics. And that is what we need, a strategy where antibiotic use can be minimized. Over the counter sale of antibiotics should be banned. What also do we need? Even if patients need antibiotics, it's important to make sure that they take the full course to kill off every last infection causing germ. Otherwise, some of these germs, they may survive, they may mutate, and they may spread. And ultimately, they will become antibiotic resistant as well. That is what we need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let us look at some of the editorials and columns from today's newspaper, beginning with Long Road Home. Hamid Nihal Ansari, an engineer from Mumbai, he befriended a Pakistani woman on Facebook and wanted to meet her. Applied for Pakistani visa, but his visa application was rejected. And ultimately, he entered into Pakistan illegally without any legal travel documents. He was arrested and spent 6 years in Pakistan jail. Despite the fact that the woman he wanted to meet, she testified in the Pakistani court that Hamid Nihal Ansari came to Pakistan to meet her. So despite her statement before the Pakistani court, Hamid Nihal Ansari spent close to 6 years in Pakistan jail. This is like a classic Bollywood story. But what this editorial talks about, it commends the Pakistani government for the release of Hamid Nihal Ansari. This editorial also gives credit to the citizens group in both India as well as Pakistan who helped this family. Also credits the human rights activists in Pakistan who worked to ensure Mr. Ansari's release. But this editorial raises another important issue. In 2008, the two countries of India and Pakistan, they decided that we should have a joint judicial committee on prisoners. Why? There are close to 471 Indian prisoners in Pakistan, 357 Pakistani prisoners in India, and majority of these prisoners are fishermen who inadvertently trespassed into each other's waters. So an agreement was signed and it was decided that we will have a joint judicial committee on prisoners to check which are the genuine cases so that innocents can be released from each other's jails and they can be sent back to their respective countries. The last time this joint judicial committee met was in 2013. After that, this committee has not met. In fact, in the last meeting in 2013, this committee had recommended that women, children, or those with mental health issues, they should be sent back to their countries on humanitarian grounds. But this recommendation is still to be implemented. So what this editorial talks about, it talks about that despite the fact that relationship between India and Pakistan is not at its best right now, but we should rework and restart this commission because there is little to be gained by holding these prisoners hostage to bitter bilateral ties and prolonging the misery of their families. There needs to be a more humane approach. That is what this editorial is all about. Let's look at another issue. A journalist in Manipur, he criticized the Chief Minister of Manipur in a Facebook post. Basically called the Chief Minister a puppet. This didn't go well with the authorities, and this journalist was arrested on the charges of sedition, which comes under section 124 capital A of Indian Penal Code. But what is sedition? Sedition is if you are promoting disaffection against the government established by law. But Supreme Court has repeatedly said that mere words or statements or slogans will not amount to sedition unless and until you are inciting people to violence, unless and until you are asking people to take up arms to overthrow the state. For example, in 1980s, some Sikhs, they raised the slogans such as Raj Karega Khalsa, Khalistan Zindabad, Long Live Khalistan. These men were arrested under the charges of sedition, but the Supreme Court ordered the release of these individuals and said mere slogans does not amount to sedition unless and until you are inciting people to violence. In the same manner, in 2015, in Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, Supreme Court said you can say whatever you want to say. You can advocate whatever you want to advocate. You can propagate whatever you want to propagate, but don't incite people to violence. Unless and until you are inciting people to violence, you cannot be arrested on sedition. And when this journalist approached the court against this sedition order, the magistrate released this journalist on bail. But this was something that was not acceptable to the government. And when the journalist was released on bail, this journalist was then booked under National Security Act. And this journalist is now booked under National Security Act for a period of 1 year. But what this editorial does, it criticizes and questions whether a person can be detained under National Security Act for 1 year at a go, because the detention can be first for 3 months. Then an advisory board has to review whether this case can continue or whether this individual can be released. It is only if this advisory board gives a go ahead, then you can be booked for another period of 3 months. That means you can be booked under NSA for a year, but not at a go, but in 3-month interval. This editorial basically criticizes the Manipur government for first arresting this journalist under sedition and then under National Security Act. So this editorial says that this is a fit case for judicial review, and the Manipur government must revoke the vindictive detention order against this journalist. That is what this editorial is all about. There is a column against the mandate for inclusion, which is basically a critique of the transgender bill which was passed by Lok Sabha recently. But all these criticisms that have been leveled in this column against the transgender bill, we have already discussed them twice in the past. More recently in yesterday's Hindu newspaper analysis. So if you are new to this channel, please go through yesterday's newspaper analysis. We have discussed this column in detail. Now let us talk about another column towards a genetic panopticon. It is about the DNA bill which is currently pending in the parliament. We'll discuss this bill in detail, but once this bill is passed in the parliament. But to understand, we still need clarity on few concepts. Number one, we have Article 20, Clause 3. This is a fundamental right against self-incrimination. That means no person shall be compelled to become a witness in his own case. The police has to independently verify and investigate whether you have committed this crime or not. You cannot be forced to become a witness in your own case. That is why confessional statements are not treated as evidence by the judiciary. But yes, if you are giving a confession in front of a magistrate or in front of a judge, that will be treated as an evidence. But your confessional statement given in presence of a police officer will not be treated as an evidence by the judiciary. That is why judiciary has said that tests such as brain mapping, polygraph, lie detector test, narco analysis, they are unconstitutional because you cannot be forced to become a witness in your own case. But court has allowed DNA fingerprinting. There are genes that are encoded in DNA, deoxyribose nucleic acid. This gene can be collected from blood, hair, skin, many other bodily substances. And this DNA is unique. Only identical twins will have identical DNA profiles. Otherwise, for all other individuals, this DNA profile is unique. And this DNA profile is a critical evidence so far as investigation into a criminal case is concerned. And this DNA is a very important tool in forensic science. And that is what the government now tries to do. Government is trying to collect the DNA samples to create a national DNA database bank or data bank. What is the intention? The intention is to create a DNA profile of all individuals and set up a data bank so that tomorrow if there is a crime, you collect this sample, DNA sample from this crime, match it with the database, and then we have the accused, we have the perpetrator of this crime, and we will arrest that individual. But there are critics who say that this creation of a data bank is violation of right to privacy, is violation of fundamental rights. And in absence of a data protection law, this DNA bill should not be passed by the parliament. So this is something that you need to understand before we can have an elaborate discussion on this DNA bill. Now let us look at some of the prelims based questions. Which of the following statements regarding advanced towed artillery gun system is or are correct? It is India's indigenous long range 155 mm gun. Yes. It is Dhanush howitzer supplement gun. Yes. It is being developed in partnership with Israel. No. It is an indigenous artillery gun. So only 1 and 2 are correct. Slims River, which underwent river piracy due to climate change, is in which country? It is in Canada. What is this river piracy? Waters from Kaskawulsh Glacier abruptly shifted direction and they flow south to the Pacific Ocean instead of north to the Yukon River. That is what we call river piracy. That means shifting of the river flow, and that is happening because of the climate change. And this Slims River in Canada, in 2017, it underwent river piracy. Previous year's prelims based question, the mind of the makers of the Constitution of India is reflected in which of the following? Preamble. Now let's look at main special 2 essay topics for you today. Words are sharper than the two-edged sword. Lending hands to someone is better than giving a dole. Please write essays in less than 1200 words. That is it from our newspaper analysis today. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.